Serhiy Hrabskyi is joining us on air, a military expert whom you know well, a retired colonel of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. Serhiy, hello.
Greetings.
You know, against the backdrop of Trump's statements and what's happening with the shelling of Ukrainian cities, we tend to forget about the attacks taking place inside Russia itself and how the Russian military-industrial complex and others are suffering. So I suggest we start with that, to refresh our memory, because there is news on this. For example, about 10 regions of Russia were under drone attack last night. We are talking, for instance, about Tula and the Moscow region. Preliminary reports say that drones targeted a design bureau, an aircraft factory, and enterprises involved in drone development. Could you please tell us your thoughts on this week overall and the most recent night of attacks on the Russian military-industrial complex? Where should we strike? What is your assessment?
This is the tactic we call the 1,000 cuts tactic. Of course, we can't achieve the goal of shutting down all targets or destroying the entire Russian Federation's war-related economy with a single attack or within 1 month. Certainly, we're not saying that Russia lacks the concept of resource dispersal or that it can't ensure a certain resilience in its military production. But the point is that we are in a state of hybrid war. And here we need to pay attention both to direct military expediency and, let's say, to the psychological pressure on Russians. And as for direct military expediency, everything is clear here, because yes, I said that Russia does have a concept of diversification, of production. But at the same time, there is also such a concept as logistics chains and distances. And so when we talk about distances, the disruption of production cycles and supply chains slows down the production of military equipment. That's the primary thing. As for other directions, that is, we're not only striking military targets, we also try to hit critical infrastructure facilities, and we've been successful at that as well. And even such highly precise attacks, specifically the attacks on the Moscow transport hub, which resulted in it being practically taken out of the transportation cycle for almost a week just in the past month, show the kind of indirect losses the Russian budget is suffering. According to some estimates, just these attacks alone have already cost around 20 billion rubles. And here, the psychological pressure on Russians is also a factor, because they need to understand, and those who still have some sense left are already beginning to realize that the Kremlin's reckless adventure is leading to them suffering, and suffering quite justly for as long as they continue to tolerate this regime. And their material situation will keep getting worse and worse. Again, going back to the idea that these attacks seem like some sort of retaliation for the attacks on our cities and villages, it's important to understand the following. We and our conversation today is direct proof of this, the ability to restore and maintain our infrastructure. Russia does not have this ability, or if it does, it is very limited. And this shows that the tactic we have now chosen, the tactic of 1,000 cut strikes on various targets across the Russian Federation, from the frontline regions such as Bryansk, Kursk, Belgorod, all the way to Kazan, and the Ural serves the single purpose to undermine the defensive capabilities of the Russian Federation and to show the entire population of Russia that it is impossible to hide from the just retribution of the Ukrainian Defense Forces. Moreover, it is meant to show the population of the Russian Federation, and this is confirmed time and again that the concept of Russian air defense is incapable of preventing such attacks. They will continue and they will intensify. And if we add to that the fact that in the near future we will supplement our drones, which already have a wide range of uses, with ballistic missiles, then I think these attacks will become even more effective and even more intense.
Sergey, here's what I want to ask you. Budanov, the head of Ukrainian intelligence, said that the Russians currently have the objective of penetrating into the Dnipropetrovsk region and allegedly creating a kind of buffer zone up to 10 kilometers deep. At least this is the political objective that Budanov is talking about. How likely is it that the Russians will be able to implement these plans? And what is the situation in this region right now? So Pokrovska, Dnipropetrovsk region, tell us about this in detail.
Inga, it's very difficult to comment on this because generally speaking, a buffer zone by definition only makes sense, for example, in a border area. That is in places where there are some demarcation lines where it is clear whose territory is whose. But what kind of buffer zone could there be in the Dnipropetrovsk region? To be honest, I don't understand. The enemy could advance and take up some positions. Will they continue to be active there in the future? Well, that's a rather debatable or controversial question, but to call it a buffer zone would probably be incorrect. However, can the enemy actually break through into the territory of the Dnipropetrovsk region? And I would probably interpret General Budanov's words as follows: to create a situation there where part of this territory would be under Russian control, which would primarily serve the political goals of the Kremlin regime. Because to say that in the current situation, the Russian Federation could somehow advance into the Dnipropetrovsk region, I probably wouldn't go that far. They aren't coping with their objectives in the Donetsk direction. So to say that they will stop their movement and start advancing toward the Dnipropetrovsk region, well, there really isn't any basis for that. And well, that's why I emphasize the necessity and importance of a political move in this direction, specifically into the territory of the Dnipropetrovsk region. Then they would be able to claim that they've entered the territory of Dnipropetrovsk. And let's recall the Kremlin's rhetoric: wherever Russia comes, that becomes its territory. So in this way, they will use this fact as an additional argument in the negotiation process, which, despite its utter futility, as we clearly understand, they will continue in order to buy time. And here they will only keep adding more demands. And it's important to understand the following, which is already clear to us. There is no talk of any real peace process. But on the political stage, this will once again allow the Russians to do the most important thing by themselves: more time. That is, you just need to calculate how much money Russia receives literally every day from hydrocarbon sales and understand how important even each individual day is to them before the next round of sanctions is imposed. Therefore, I would say that they can be present in the territory of the Dnipropetrovsk region. I'll repeat once more, but it's probably not about a buffer zone, but it will mainly be used as a significant political argument on the international stage.
Serhiy, I'd also like to discuss with you something else that was mentioned in Budanov's interview. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea is currently supplying 40% of Russian ammunition for the war in Ukraine. Tell me, please, is it actually possible to somehow stop this cooperation? Because honestly, that's just an unbelievable figure. I don't even know how to.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Comment on that.
In general, it is possible to stop it, and here's why. Of course, this will require us to take unconventional actions, but here's why it can be stopped: because North Korea is trying to benefit from this. And a significant portion of this ammunition is unique. It is North Korean and can only be used together with North Korean weaponry. In other words, they are essentially getting Putin hooked on a kind of dependency on North Korean supplies. To stop it, well, of course, it's possible. The simplest way is to persuade China to influence its satellite, North Korea, to hold the supplies. A more complicated way, which would require, let's say, operational intervention, if you will, is to destroy the supply lines. And, this is actually not such an unsolvable task, considering that the Russian Far East of what is still called the Russian Federation is connected to the center by literally just 2 railway lines and a rather underdeveloped network of airports and airfields, which can be targeted. And in general, everything possible can be done to minimize these supplies. And even if we talk about maritime communications, the ports on the Sea of Japan are just as vulnerable. And here, it simply comes down to how far the Ukrainian defense forces are willing to go in their desire to strike enemy territory. There are a lot of, truly excellent, if I can put it that way, targets there, the destruction of which could lead to a serious transportation collapse and practically halt supplies.
Sergey, there's something else I'd like to ask you about. Ukraine and the United Kingdom are signing a historic agreement to supply the Ukrainian armed forces with air defense missiles. They're called THAADs, as far as I understand, right? This is stated on the UK government's website. According to the government's announcement, the country will be producing missiles for this air defense system for Ukraine over the next 19 years. In total, London is supposed to supply 5,000 missiles to Ukraine. Please comment on this.
That's wonderful news. So you see, in the military, in operational planning, the most important thing is to understand the source of a particular resource and the predictability and stability of its supply. In other words, this allows you to rhythmically plan your subsequent actions, to allocate this resource, to determine the directions in which it will be used, and so on and so forth. Therefore, this statement can and should be viewed with absolute enthusiasm, understanding that in this way we are gaining indestructible resources that will allow us to significantly improve the effectiveness and quality of our air defense. The supply of these missiles is extremely important for us, as they allow us to cover a very significant segment of our air defense, specifically the segment responsible for countering both drones and cruise missiles. I am not prepared to say to what extent these particular missiles will be able to destroy ballistic missiles and other more dangerous types of enemy missiles. Nevertheless, if we have guaranteed volumes of arms supplies that will meet our needs, or at least mostly meet our needs, in terms of countering drones and cruise missiles, that's excellent. At the same time, let's not forget that negotiations are ongoing regarding the acquisition of Patriots. Thus, from a defense standpoint, we can significantly strengthen the protection of our airspace, but unfortunately, this will not solve the problem. As our military says, you can't win a war with defense alone. That's why we need to attack the enemy in order to neutralize the very concept of an air threat.
What is your opinion on statements by American media that Trump could personally allocate a $300 million aid package to Ukraine? And in general, this sum of 300 million, what does it mean? Is it a lot, a little, or is it a good start? There are so many questions, but not quite enough answers.
Well, let's to give a definitive answer, let's wait until something actually arrives. Because having already had experience of cooperating and interacting with the White House administration, until we actually get our hands on these 300 million, or rather the material equivalent that they will give you, it's very difficult to say how it will affect things. Although here, as one of the classics once said, the ice has been broken, gentlemen of the jury. In general, I never had any doubt that the American administration would eventually return to the path of providing support and assistance to Ukraine, whether that be in any way either free of charge, that is as aid, or through the sale of weapons and military equipment. But the following needs to be understood. Such trade operations, if we can call them trade operations, are first and foremost beneficial to America itself, which gets the opportunity to develop its own production and receive certain profits, because all this money stays in America. It doesn't go anywhere else. That is, for the most part, this money goes to meet the needs and demands of the voters of, Donald Trump himself or his opponents, but nevertheless, it stays in America. Therefore, this can only be welcomed. But again, having already received a certain injection of skepticism, let's see what this actually materializes into.
Agreed. Sergey, thank you very much for joining us on the air. Serhiy Hrabskyi, military expert, was on the air with Ukraine Today. All the best to you. Goodbye.
All the best. Goodbye.